My name is Caleb Webster Alt. This week's video is for FTE-217 Week 7 assignment. In this video there are 4 parts. It does state that the video requirement limit is 7 minutes. I'll most likely exceed that as usual. To begin, for part 1, it says, reflecting upon the guidance you have received in the lectures for this course and through outside resources, you will demonstrate your knowledge in performing trigger work by responding to the following prompts. There are 3 prompts, so let's begin. For number 1, it says you will analyze when trigger work is necessary or should be performed and when it should not be performed. I believe trigger work would be considered necessary if the gun were to be experiencing malfunctions such as a failure to fire. Things do happen, things do degrade. People install things improperly, so there are instances where performing work on a trigger is necessary. There are also times when someone, like a customer, is going to come to you and ask you to modify their trigger for whatever reason, and you most likely should not. And if you do, you should really stick to the specification of a safe legal requirement, which is around 4 pounds is what's considered to be safe. Aftermarket triggers that just drop right into ARs nowadays can go down to like 2.5 pounds. I think there's some that go down to like 1.5 pounds. Don't quote me on that, but I would just stay away from anything that makes your customer unsafe. Don't do it. Don't do any custom trigger work on a trigger for any customer because you're at fault. When it should be performed, when you're doing a drop-in trigger like a Timney or a Geisley, any drop-in trigger can be performed and it can be considered necessary as long as it's not going to put the operator in danger. And as long as it safely functions, I believe trigger work would be necessary. Especially if something's damaged, broken, just worn out, you need to perform work on the trigger. So moving on to number 2, it says you will discuss the problems that can occur when improper trigger work has been performed. So yeah, when improper trigger work has been performed on a fire control group, things can happen. The least of your worries would be a failure to fire, so that could be easily solved. But if someone were to actually perform custom trigger work where they sand away or polish at the parts or try to modify the springs in some way or manner, that can really bad stuff can happen. It can make your firearm go cyclic, and it'll just shoot full auto on accident, of course, unintentionally, but it's still a problem and it is a safety hazard. So for number 3, it says you will discuss what constitutes improper trigger work and how it can be avoided. So yeah, what constitutes to improper trigger work is I have to say just laziness. Like if you don't take enough time to do the research and to perform the work properly and safely with the proper tools and the knowledge that is needed, then yeah. And it can be avoided by doing proper research, figuring out the specs, using the right tools, using the right products. Don't use cheap products. And definitely do not be performing any trigger work on any firearm. It's just not intelligent. It does make you liable. It puts people's lives at risk. And yeah, for my instance, I actually have only ever done trigger work per se on a black powder revolver. When you buy a black powder revolver, they come out of the factory pretty rough. They got a lot of rough edges, a lot of unfinished edges. There will be, on the edges, there'll be just scale, like pieces of metal that weren't sanded off when the cutting was taking place or the molding was being done to the firearm, So taking apart a black powder revolver is the most that I've done and probably the most that I ever will do. And that was on my own firearm. So I did have to take it apart, sand some stuff, make it to where it was smooth, but other than that, I would not touch the trigger. So for part 2, it says, following the guidance you've received, perform a detailed inspection of your AR and articulate what you are looking for. So, to go over that, I am going to be bringing a rifle and the camera. So, to begin, keep your fingers off the trigger at all times. And remove the feed source. As you can see, the magazine has a blaze orange follower. That's a clear indication that it's empty, so we'll put this off to the side. I'm not going to completely disassemble. I'm just going to talk to the camera about this, just to keep it short, sweet, and simple. When you are inspecting an AR style platform, I'm going to be looking for certain things, such as if it has a telescoping stock, does it work? When you're taking the rifle apart, does the takedown pins work properly? Are you able to take the rifle apart? Sorry, excuse me. I have like hiccups or something. Can you take the rifle apart in a quick manner? Is the rifle fighting you? Stuff like that. Are the detent pins and the takedown pins holding everything in place? You know, is stuff coming out? You know, stuff like that. So that's what you're going to want to really look for. When you push this detent pin out, which I have no nails, so I can't really get a hold of it. You want to know that that comes apart properly, and you also want to know that the detent is retaining that pin as it's supposed to, as that is its intended purpose, and as well as the front one. I'm not going to be taking that apart, but we will get into that. You also want to be looking in here. This is your fire control group. You're going to definitely want to thoroughly inspect that. Take it apart, look at all the components, look at the sear surfaces, check everything. As far as the bolt carrier group goes, same thing. You're going to want to check everything. Make sure that your gas key screws are staked properly, or keyed properly, and that they're torqued down, they're not loose, your gas key's not wobbling. A good test for your compression rings on the bolt itself. Pull the bolt out in the unlocked position and stand it up on the bolt head and let the weight of the carrier group weigh down on that. If the weight of the bolt carrier group forces the compression rings down and pushes the bolt into the locked position, that tells you that your compression rings are definitely worn out and it's time to get a new bolt. Same thing with ejectors and extractors. Pay attention to those pieces. Look for wear marks. Look for chips, cracks, stuff like that on the extractor. So that's the basics of like doing a thorough, in-depth inspection of an AR-15. Quick. So moving on. Not moving on. Also, other things you're going to want to make sure to check on is the gas block. You don't want the gas block to be loosening, of course, and also your muzzle. Make sure the muzzle is torqued and calibrated as it's supposed to be. Castle nuts, all of it, all the 9 yards. Just check everything on an AR platform to make sure that it has been installed properly and that it is functioning like it is supposed to. So let's put this off to the side now, and let's move on to some other stuff. So for part 3, it says, check the safety systems and disconnector operation on your firearm. Articulate what you were looking for. So keep in mind this is a safe gun. Check the safety system. So it's on safe. We will attempt to pull the trigger, and what we should experience is the trigger is not supposed to move. Trigger doesn't move, and also you don't want the hammer dropping. So that disconnector is supposed to keep a hold of that hammer and not let it fall forward. And that is exactly what it is doing. We can then flip it to safe and pull the trigger. It goes off. We'll cycle. Put it on safe again. Pull the trigger. Nothing happens. So our safety mechanism is working. So that's great. Let's talk about the disconnector operation. Pretty much the main purpose of the disconnector is to grab a hold of the little hook on the back of the hammer, because when you pull your trigger, It allows it to pivot essentially and give it room to release, and it falls onto the sear surface of the trigger itself when you release. That's its purpose. I don't, if that fire, if to go more into the function, if your disconnector is broken and or misplaced, like if you forgot to install it for whatever reason, you would have a semi-automatic bolt action firearm. It just wouldn't function. It wouldn't cycle properly. So the disconnector is needed. It's a very important part into the AR-15 platform. So don't lose it. Don't forget to install it. Check it. Check for deformation, damage, wear, all that. So for part 4, it says, articulate what you believe will be the easiest and most difficult parts of making repairs and alterations to the AR-15 platform. I believe the easiest aspect of making repairs or AR-15 alterations to these guns would be the vast knowledge we have, for one. There's so much information out there about these guns, and also the specialized tools for the ARs. A specialized tool for an AR-15, its main purpose is to make your job and life easier, as well as to perform the work on the gun to the best of your ability without causing any damage to it, and to install everything properly and to spec so that the firearm functions safely. So I think that would be the easiest aspect of repairing or making alterations to these firearms, is that as long as you're willing to invest into these specialized tools, I think that actually performing the work and putting on accessories and attachments is fairly straightforward, and it is simple, and it can be done very safely. As far as the most difficult parts of making repairs and alterations to the AR-15 platform, as I said, there are a lot of specialized tools coming out, and that's because there are being so many changes are being made to the AR platform. So many companies are coming out with all these new attachments and things. You can make your AR into anything you want. And so I think as time goes on and things change, companies come out, more products are made. We are, as an industry, as a gun community, people, hobbyists, gunsmiths alike, we're all going to have to learn to evolve and to learn these new accessories, to learn even new specialized tools that come out for certain things. But honestly, in my opinion, I think the AR-15 platform, there's so much knowledge out there nowadays. There's so many resources at our fingertips, such as the internet, that repairs and alterations can be made to these firearms fairly easily, as long as you follow the guidelines and do everything correctly. So that pretty much wraps everything up. Let's just quickly go over everything like I normally do. So for part 1, we reflected on the guidance in the lectures. I went over trigger work and when it is necessary to be performed and when it is not necessary to be performed. We also discussed problems that can occur when improper trigger work is performed. And I also went over things that can constitute improper trigger work and how we can avoid that. For part 2, I performed a quick, detailed inspection of the AR. I explained what I would be looking for and all of that. So for part 3, I also showed you that I checked the safety mechanism, and I went over the disconnector operation very briefly, I feel like, but it was it's a fairly straightforward part / mechanism. That's what it does. I explain the importance of it, and if it is not a part of the gun, then the gun doesn't function. So it's important. And then for part 4, finally, I went over the easiest, most difficult parts / aspects of working / making repairs and alterations to the AR-15 platform. So that is everything. I'm gonna wrap it up here. So yeah, thank you very much. Have a nice day.